Hi, and welcome to Finding Your Way Through Therapy, a proud member of the Sightcraft Network. The goal of this podcast is to demystify therapy, what can happen in therapy, and the wide array of conversations you can have in and about therapy. Through personal experiences, guests will talk about therapy, their experiences with it, and how psychology and therapy are present in many places in their lives, with lots of authenticity and a touch of humor. Here is your guest host, Courtney Romanowski.
All right, thank you. Yes, I am obviously not Steve Bisson, the host of Finding Your Way Through Therapy, but I am his friend and colleague, Courtney Romanowski. I am a licensed mental health counselor, registered dance movement therapist, and I am back for a second guest host appearance. I was on for episode 126, Discover the Therapeutic Potential of Movement with Audrey Albert King. Audrey is also a dear friend of mine. She is a licensed mental health counselor, board certified dance movement therapist, and a certified movement analyst. And she, as my first guest, we explored and discussed dance movement therapy as a form of mental health counseling. My hope is to, with these special episodes, kind of bring the different modalities, the different creative arts therapies to the forefront. They are becoming a little bit more well known and used, but I think there's still a lot of questions out there and a lot of info that can be shared. So here we are. I am here today with Krista Verrastro. She is a registered drama therapist based in Maryland, and we're going to be talking about drama therapy today. Hi, Krista. Thank you for coming on.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I thought I would just kind of let you introduce yourself and share more about what you do.
Sure. So yes, as you mentioned, I am in Maryland. I am a private practice clinician since 2016. I actually worked the longest in my career in domestic violence and sexual abuse and assault. And that turned into when I went into private practice, my niche has become abuse. I always say my little tagline is I work with people who feel used, abused, neglected, or rejected.
Wow. Yeah.
So really a lot of relational trauma. I like that work. Um, and just people who feel different in other ways. I've always been kind of a weirdo myself, and I love it about myself, and I love it about my friends and the people in my life. And it's something, hey, being a creative arts therapist is part of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Um, so that's kind of my niche, is like people who've had that relational trauma and also just kind of don't fit in the mainstream in certain ways. So, yeah, and I see people online and in person. I'm outside of the Baltimore area. Um, and I also do things like vision board workshops that people can take from anywhere. During the pandemic, I moved those online. So that's fun
Cool.
that people can, if they're interested in doing something with me and aren't in Maryland, that's open usually at least January, sometimes other times of the year. So
It's a great time to
yeah.
do that, obviously.
Yeah, and I do other workshops too, like where we're going to talk about what drama therapy is, but I do other things that incorporate self-care and drama therapy, stuff like that. So,
Wonderful. Awesome.
yeah.
So right off the bat, wondering how would you describe kind of somebody who doesn't know what drama therapy is? How would you describe it to them?
Yeah, so I basically say, you know how there's talk therapy and you talk your problems through, and I always use a starting point of most people know art therapy and music therapy and
Yeah.
understand a little bit more about how that works. And I say, well, drama therapy is lesser known, but it's the same idea of instead of just talking, we do things that are drama theater oriented. So storytelling, mask making, puppetry, whatever kind of drama techniques to bring into the therapy. So that's kind of the gist I give, but I also came prepared with definitions. So I will share those. These are from the North American Drama Therapy Association. Drama therapy is the systematic and intentional use of drama/theater processes, products, and associations to achieve the therapeutic goals of symptom relief, emotional and physical integration, and personal growth. And then another one is drama therapy is an active, experiential approach to facilitating change. Through storytelling, projective play, purposeful improvisation, and performance, participants are invited to rehearse desired behaviors, practice being in relationship, expand and find flexibility between life roles, and perform the change they wish to be and see in the world. Very
Wow.
lengthy, but I think I love that end. The
Yeah.
very Gandhi right there, like be the change you wish to be in the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and so here's one thing I like to say about drama therapy. To me, it is expressive arts therapies because drama does incorporate movement and music
Mm.
and visual arts and all
Hmm.
that. So to me, fun fact, when I was young and I discovered this, I discovered it as a teen and knew I was going to go to undergrad and grad
Yeah.
school right away to become this thing. But music was actually, well, and I'd say even before music, visual arts was my first love. Then it became like more school oriented. I was very talented in music, that sort of thing. But then when it came to discovering this, I was like, drama makes sense because we play roles in everyday life.
Mm.
Whereas
Mm.
not everybody considers themselves a visual artist. Not everybody considers themselves musically inclined, right? So to me,
Yeah.
it felt more natural that we do play roles and we do things that are dramatic in everyday life, and it does incorporate the other ones. So I'm not alone in that thinking. A lot of my fellow drama therapists say that we're kind of like expressive arts therapists anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of overlap between creative arts therapies as it is. So definitely a
It's
lot of, yeah.
it's so interesting you say that. I mean, that makes so much sense to me. We do play roles, whether
Mhm.
we're aware of them or not. So
Mhm.
drama therapy does, for me, feel like a very natural place
Yeah.
to go.
Yeah, and it can be subtle, which I'll get
Right.
into. It doesn't have to be like people are like, are you on a big stage and acting your traumas out? And it doesn't have to be something as big as that. It could be something more subtle. So something I'll say about the different kind of techniques we use.
Mm.
Play, role play, storytelling, puppetry, mask making, sand tray work,
Yeah.
various types of visual arts, music, dance, poetry, photography, rituals, which is one of my favorite aspects of it. And one I throw in there's performance because there are drama therapists that do performance based work, meaning it might be plays that are already written, like Shakespearean plays, and have people therapeutically perform them. There's
Mm.
famous people who've done it in prisons and different things like that, right? Or some of the work I did in the earlier part of my career was to help people I would work with create their own play and put that on. So when I started my career, I worked at a mental health facility, a day treatment center. And so part of the programming there was they would put on a play at least once a year.
Yeah.
And I got to do some cool stuff with them. Like one of the plays we did was, and this was generated by them. And I was like, what kind of theme do you want to explore? They said, we want to have a play where we switch positions with the staff. So I
Mm.
love that in the end, they came to the conclusion that there is a reason the rules are in place. And if they got to play out what would happen if there was chaos and they didn't follow the rules and they got to be the staff and they're like, free for all. In the end, they're
Yeah.
like, there's a reason there's structure and that keeps us safe. And it was so lovely.
Mm.
So that's one way that performance can also help. So yeah, written stuff already or writing stuff with a group and performing it in that way. But not every drama therapist uses that kind of stuff. Like in my work now, I'm largely individual therapy based,
Hmm.
and I don't have the opportunity to do that kind of work anymore. So it's very flexible. There's some drama therapists who spend most of their careers doing plays and that sort of thing. There's a lot of groups that do that kind of work with developmental disabilities and that sort
Hmm.
of thing. And so yeah, it can be kind of different. It can be more group oriented, it can be more individual oriented, but that's some ideas about what it entails.
Yeah, I love that you're acknowledging the flexibility of it because just like talk therapy, we don't, well, I should say, speak for myself, I don't talk with each client in the same way, or
Mhm.
our sessions don't look the same as another client. And
Mhm.
so dance therapy, drama therapy is going to be flexible depending on who the client is
Mhm.
and what they're ready for
Yes.
and interested in.
Yeah, and so I know one of the things we mentioned we might talk about is like what's valuable about it.
Hmm.
And I don't know if this is a good segue, if you have any other questions about what it is.
Well, let's segue and then we
Okay.
can move
Okay.
around with it if we need to.
So one of my favorite concepts from drama therapy It's so interesting because I feel old. I got my master's 2003 to 2005,
Mhm.
and the language we used is aesthetic distance. And I'm going to
Ooh,
explain that. But what's
okay.
fascinating to me is the language around trauma work these days matches that, but we didn't have that language back then, from my understanding. I mean, I
Okay.
hadn't heard of the window of tolerance and these things back then. So, aesthetic distance, it is a term that was created by the person I studied under in my program. And the idea is it's a space where you think and feel simultaneously, like it's balanced,
Okay.
right? So your thinking and your feeling is equal. It's not like one outweighs the other.
Hmm.
So your cognition, your affect, it's all even, right? So this idea of being over distanced is when you're too far away from your emotions and you're too in the cerebral, and being under distanced would be if you're too in the emotions and too far away from the cerebral. Did I say that
Hmm.
right? Right. So
Yes.
over distance, too far; under distance, not far enough. Explain. So the idea with why this is important in creative arts in general, the therapies, not just drama therapy. It's so for drama therapy, it would be something like if someone is too close to their emotions, you would want to use techniques that take them further, right? So projective
Mm-hmm.
techniques like masks or puppets or sand trays, something that takes them away. Like pick an object that represents you is taking them further from their emotions. So that gets a little more balance into the thinking,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Whereas if somebody's really cerebral, they're in their brain and they're like, I could talk about this stuff, but I'm not really connecting to the emotions. You would do something that's like, okay, now this empty chair is going to be your dead mother, or something like we want to really kind of pull on those emotions, bring them up and make them like easier to access and work with.
Yes.
Right. So that's part of what we as creative arts therapists do. And my understanding, I'm not actually sure. I have ideas of how it would work in dance movement therapy. I'm more familiar talking to a lot of art therapist friends about how it works in art therapy, right? So, for
Mm-hmm.
example, using, say, finger painting is not something you would want to do with someone who's not very regulated because it's so wild and there's no borders and right, it's
Right.
messy and it's childlike. Whereas somebody who you're trying to get them to have more emotions, you might do something like that, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So, same, all of our creative arts therapies have this idea, but again, that was the language we were given back in the day. And now we have this window of tolerance language. It's the same idea that we are in the sweet spot where we can think and feel okay. And we're like, I got this.
Hmm.
We get hyper aroused, fall out of the window, how we get back to the window. So it's very similar. And I love that it all aligns in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. And we had mentioned briefly before how close drama and dance therapy can be because it really utilizes the body, so much of the body.
Yep.
And so it's so interesting to just, as you were saying, like mask making, for somebody who's thinking, yeah, like how would I help somebody ground in their body who's experiencing like too much emotions, as opposed to using that their body to find where that emotion is. I don't know if I'm making sense, but it's
Yeah.
just the playing.
Yeah, and it's interesting. And again, I imagine all the creative arts therapies have this sort of idea to them, but with, for example, the mask making,
Mhm.
there's this beautiful idea of getting to subtext into freeing things that might not be easy to access without projective techniques. So, for example, if I have a mask on my face, I'm hiding a part of me, but my body is more available to express
Yeah.
myself,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, it's
Mm-hmm.
a different kind of expression. Something might come out that we're not necessarily often tuning into because we're kind of focusing on something different. So, I
Yeah.
love that idea too.
Mm-hmm. And so this is actually kind of segueing my mind to another thing that I wanted to get to was you have some blogs on your website, which we will definitely reference
Mhm.
later in the episode, how to find them. One of them being about different myths and beliefs that people have about creative arts
Mhm.
therapies. And a few of, well, they all stood out to me, but a few sorry, one of them that stood out to me was like, well, okay, so what if I don't consider myself a performer or like I've never done that before. I'm not talented
Mhm.
enough, how somebody like that, how would you introduce drama therapy or I don't know.
Yeah. So one of the misperceptions, and I know again, this is common across the creative arts therapies, is for me, it's, oh, so does that mean you work with actors? For you, it's probably, oh, do you work with dancers
Mm-hmm,
or art
mm-hmm.
therapists? Do you work with artists? And no, that's not obviously only what we would do.
No.
What I tell people is kind of what we started off saying is that all of us play roles in everyday life. And I am a fan of parts work. I am not of any particular school. I'm not like an IFSer or anything. I think I like the general approach. And I was always taught in my training every role has its purpose, which is the same as any of the other schools of thought with parts work. And so I do help clients look at like, what's the function of these roles? What would it be like if we let go of those roles? How is it helping? How is it hurting? How can we have more peace with that role?
Mm-hmm.
So that's one way that's more subtle. Like, even if a client is not super into the body stuff and the acting stuff, we can at least have the language of let's look at those different parts that arise.
And by parts and roles, you mean like wife, mother,
Yes.
profession, those different
Yes.
things. Mm-hmm.
Us as creative arts therapists is a role. Like,
Yes.
maybe you and I have done teaching or something that's a role.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, all our social roles, all our professional roles. Um, Interestingly, one of the things I was trained in, we have this thing called role profiles, which is a fun tool. And it's an assessment tool where you get categories. It's I am this, I am not this, I don't know if I'm this, I want to be this.
Mm.
And the creator of this was the same person I studied under. And you get a deck of archetypes, right? So some
Yeah.
people listening might be familiar with like Jungian archetypes. So the way that the creator of this came up with it was looking at plays in Western history and seeing which archetypes appeared the most. So yes, there's like mother, father, daughter, son,
Mm-hmm.
sister, brother, those again, sort of social family roles. And then there's things like helper,
Mm-hmm.
leader, angry person, wise person. There's
Yeah.
different sort of joker, right? There's different roles, worrier, warrior. So there's lots of different things that we can fall into, and it's helpful to observe. And when our roles change, right? They shift. We identify with certain ones heavily at certain points of our life. We let go of some completely, or we don't identify as much with it. We
Mm-hmm.
might have ones we want to practice because we want more of them. So that's like one way into the world of drama therapy is just naming those different parts and having better I do like the IFS, like usually befriending all the parts. All parts are welcome, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
I do like that idea of, what are they all showing up to do for us? And even if they go overboard sometimes, how could we listen to their messages and
Mm-hmm.
see how we want to use that or not?
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny, besides the, oh, you must work with dancers, I get this. So are we going to be doing like a dance class or what is this going
Right.
to look like? I'm like, no, no. I mean, we can do ballet if you'd like, but that's not the point of dance therapy. And so for the folks who are new to moving in any sort of way or just open to starting to explore dance therapy, I start with the breath and I start with
Mm.
just naming, how to become a little bit more in touch with the body. And so when you said, just building that language and using it,
Mhm.
that can be what a beginning session or use of dance therapy, drama therapy could
Mhm.
look like. Not necessarily throwing people right up on stage and expecting them
Yes.
to perform.
Yeah. So it can be subtle like that.
Yeah.
Or like some ways along the lines of the part stuff is if someone talks about an emotion, I might be like, let's give that emotion a name. Let's
Hmm.
draw it. Let's make a mask of it. What would it say? When does it feel most powerful?
Hmm.
What
Hmm.
is it trying to serve you? How is it harming you? And how, when it harms you, when does it overstayed its welcome, so to speak? Like, how can you have a better relationship with it? So those are
Hmm.
some easy ways to get into it for sure. Another one I mentioned earlier is ritual. And
Yes.
I love this concept. My thing has always kind of been to at least end every session with clients with their own ritual. So each person having something that feels fitting for them. So I have things like in my office, affirmation stones, where
Mhm.
they have pretty images and things on the back like, I am strong, I'm peaceful, I shine bright. I have advice from nature cards where it's different things in nature and they have little pieces of advice.
Yeah.
I have merriment making cards, which one of my friends created a deck of cards where it's like, leave a gift on a neighbor's doorstep or read a story to a pet. Like,
Hmm.
it's just cute little things that are kind of the idea, again, as we now know with trauma language in polyvagal theory world, it's like being in that ventral vagal state, leaving in a positive, connected, I'm okay, that window of tolerance idea again.
Hmm.
And so, we get activated during sessions and just kind of tuning into one of those rituals. And sometimes, even with the affirmation stones, being able to say, where do you feel that in your body when you say, I am powerful? Or where do you feel I am peaceful in
Hmm.
your body?
Hmm.
Right. Or those pieces of advice from nature, that kind of a thing. And some people I often say, these are the ones that are common, like a lot of people like those, and I'll give them options in the first session. And I'll say, hey, if you want to make something up, there's other things. I also have a worry box that it's like like a suggestion box, but it's
Yeah,
leave your worries behind. So if you want to write that as you get out the door, you leave your worry in the box.
I love that.
Some people just like to do gratitude practicing. So I'll have them name something during the week that went really well, they're proud of, and just feel that in their body. Really take a moment to savor what it feels like.
Hmm.
So having those rituals is a good practice for, yeah,
And
that
rituals not
regulation.
just in session with you,
Mhm.
but
Yeah, I
outside of.
encourage rituals outside the session. I tell clients whether it's wake up and use affirmations, end of the night, do some gratitude practicing.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of talking about how to use that in everyday life.
Hmm. Yeah, me too. And especially like in sitting with it, right? Not just, it's great to make note of something that you were grateful for, but to sit with it and let it come into you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the world of therapy, the power of connection and understanding is undeniable. That's where the Peer Network steps in, offering a bridge of support that complements your clinical expertise. Imagine a service where certified peer support specialists, through telehealth, extend your reach, offering clients continuous, compassionate care. This is what the Peer Network provides. Our peer support specialists are not just trained, they're experienced. They've walked through the path of recovery and resilience. They speak the language of empathy and understanding, essential in mental health and addictive recovery journeys. As a clinician, your goal is to see your clients thrive. The Peer Network enhances this journey, offering a layer of support that's accessible, reliable, and deeply human. Join us in this mission of comprehensive care. Incorporate the Peer Network into your practice today and witness the transformative power of peer support in mental health. Visit thepeernetwork.com. Together, let's create a world where everyone feels supported, understood, and connected.
So I wanted to get to as well, you had mentioned the vision boards
Hmm.
that you do and you offer workshops, you were saying?
Yep. Yeah, so 2017, I started them, and I don't even know what possessed me to do it. Like, because, a lot of people have done, come make a vision board, the collage of a vision board. And that's great. But something in me was like, I could do so much more with this. I could take it to the drama therapy level and actually have people acting out, like test their future selves, see what it's like to feel their future self. So I have them do things like we do some guided imagery, some qigong, letting go of things, talk
Yeah.
about, movement again. Um, and there's an activity I do magic box where it's like getting rid of stuff and we burn it together and that kind of thing, using our imaginations. And so it's the first part is letting go. The second part is if I do it in person, we do make the boards in person. if it's online, I'll have people make boards in advance and just split into breakout rooms on Zoom and share with partners about like what are their goals and talk about it. And
Mm.
then we get into some drama therapy of getting to enroll people in the group as their obstacles
Mm.
and testing out like what it feels like to enroll other people as resources, like whether that be family members or partners or friends, and going up against the obstacles, like getting to practice. Uh-oh, here's time management, or here's, social media sucking me in again, or my
Yeah.
insecurities are talking back to me. And then they get to like have these people play the parts of their resources and say, I'm with you in this and we could talk this thing down. And then they get to test their future self and see how that feels to step into that part. And then we do some strength role plays where they get to develop their inner strength characters and get in touch with, how to hold those in mind with them more often. And we do end with some gratitude practicing because I like to
Mm.
say we focus so much on what we don't have that we want or what we do have that we don't want. And we don't focus enough on what's already working well. So I like to cover all those pieces.
That sounds amazing. I'll definitely have to check that out. It sounds like something I would really benefit from.
Ah,
And everybody, and so, these things that I know as somebody who works in trauma with trauma,
mhm.
you've just mentioned a lot of day-to-day things, though, time management or, getting sucked into social media. And so it kind of reminds me to mention that the creative arts therapies aren't just for one sort of thing or one sort of need. It's
Mhm.
really they can be used for anybody, for anything.
Right. Yeah. And same with I do EMDR therapy, and it's the same as
Mm,
like people think, oh, it's for trauma. No, like you could use it for anxiety, depression,
yeah.
any kind of issue, really. So I think these things both are great. Yeah. And I mentioned earlier, it's not just for groups. It's
Nope.
not just for kids because people think, oh, well, kids, and because play therapy, even people have that misperception. And anybody who's willing to just be expressive and use these things is going to benefit. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, yeah, anybody and everybody. And it is a different experience I have found working with individuals, but just as powerful, just as useful as with
Yeah.
in group,
Yeah.
as the group use.
And same, interestingly, when I wrote that, I think it was pre-pandemic, I think. But another one I would add to that list of misperceptions is it can't be done online because even
Mm,
I, having trained in EMDR in 2017 and having only learned how to do that in person when the pandemic hit and we all had to go online, I was like,
yeah,
oh man, having to learn to translate drama therapy and EMDR therapy online, it was a lot at once.
absolutely.
And I'm happy to report that, like, once I figured it out, it's golden and it still works. And I would say, like, for example, my vision board workshops online, the only things that are lacking are things like, for example, in person, I have scarves where when people take on
Mm,
roles and give other people roles, I'll say, do you want to pick a scarf that helps? You could put it on the person. Like, if it's an obstacle, you
mm-hmm.
want it like over their head or around their shoulders. I give them opportunity to make it more expressive, right? Whereas
Yeah.
online, I can't do that kind of element. But really, like, there's not much that hasn't translated.
Yeah, I think at this point we've really figured it out in some
Yeah,
capacity of
yeah,
how it translates over the screen.
yeah.
Yeah.
Part
And
of our
we're
creative art therapy brains, right? It's like we're creative folks, so
yeah.
we can figure this out.
All the problem solving that we can do just by
Yeah.
practicing some creativity. So again, I don't mean to maybe be a little bit repetitive, but I've had some folks who like I don't have a creative bone in my body.
Mhm.
I don't have rhythm. I just, which is fine. People don't want to use dance movement therapy as a modality. Absolutely fine. I don't force it on anybody.
Mhm.
Um, but there is some trickiness to easing people into it because I think there's
Yeah.
still this, even as adults, does there need to be good at something, or have to have a final product that looks nice, or um, yeah, to be
Yeah.
good at something.
One of my favorite things to say to anyone who will listen, basically, I love talking about this stuff, honestly. I'm like,
It's
I'm a nerd. Um,
great.
Process, not product. right?
Yeah.
It's about exploring, expressing. It's not about the products created. Sometimes there are products created, sometimes not really. Sometimes it's more improv and different things. Um, but yeah, it's really about just the process and the uncovering ourselves and that sort of thing in the process. So I definitely emphasize that with clients when they're like, I messed this up. And I'm like, this is just for us to explore. It's not going in a museum or a
Mm-hmm.
gallery.
Mm-hmm.
uh, so that's important that anybody can be creative. And I know like some of the things, some of my clients I love over the years, they say that the more you can advertise to your ideal client, the more like they come and that sort of thing. I get a lot of ideal clients and I get people who are willing to play and
Yeah.
be spontaneous and that kind of thing. So I'm thankful. But when there's somebody who's less sure of those things, I'm just like, hey, you obviously trust me so far. And my clients know, like, I'm always like, I'm science minded. I will tell them,
Mm.
all day long about the evidence based kind of stuff with, again, brain science, neuroscience stuff. But I'll be like, just take a gamble here. If it starts to feel uncomfortable, you could always shut it down, but play with me in this for a moment and let's see how
Yeah.
this feels. I have a reason I'm doing this. I have,
Mm-hmm.
lots of years of education and experience to back this up. So I know it might sound silly, but let's
Right.
try it. And I've never had anybody be like, no. So
That's it. Like, yeah, just try it and
yeah.
see. Dip your
Yeah.
toe in.
And again, with like even just being able to use the language of parts, another thing I often do is use metaphor. Like just
Mm.
yesterday, I was talking with a client about the castle metaphor and letting people in, like your drawbridge gets lowered. If you see someone
Mm.
who's safe and you can lower it a little bit and kind of peek out there and test the waters and like your moat's still keeping you safe and you got your big walls keeping you safe. You can take a peek and you can let it down all the way and let them in and have your little party in the castle for the people who are safe. And that resonated for them.
Yeah.
So it's like using just metaphors to kind of
Mm-hmm.
make sense of their world in some ways.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think too, it's important maybe to point out that we are just pulling this stuff out of thin air. We as practitioners are trained. We went to school for this. There's
Yeah.
a whole science, like Dance Therapy Association, Drama Therapy Association. It's not just some made up thing where we're
Which gets me ticked off when there's people who say we're not as legit. And I get that we don't
yeah.
have the studies because we all
Well,
know there's a lot of BS and bureaucracy and all this stuff, but
mhm.
there is a lot. And I love that more and more Bessel van der Kolk talks about
Yes, yeah.
drama as healing and other creative arts therapies. Um, it's happening. There are more and more people who call me saying, like, I read about this thing,
Mhm.
but it really bothers me when people say we're not as legit and we're not as evidence-based. Like, no,
Mm. Come try it and then you'll know. You'll have the evidence.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But again, we are, studies are catching up. I
Yes.
liken it to we've known for years about why meditation, like we knew it was helpful. We didn't know the why it was helpful necessarily, right? Now we have brain scans that show that the amygdala gets calmed and right
Yes.
the
Yeah.
frontal lobe gets like calmer and all this stuff. So same thing is like we've known these things since at least the 1900s.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're getting the language of why, right? Like it is all the window of tolerance and all this language we have now, but we've known it intuitively. We've seen it for ourselves before we even
Mm-hmm.
had the language to catch up to it.
Mm-hmm.
It's exciting to see it's kind of exploding.
Yes, it's happening, like you said.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. And yeah, like many of us, I won't assume that all of us, but as kids, colored or even, got
Mhm.
into music, whether it was playing or just listening and taking it
Mhm.
in. As babies, we bounce around and
Mhm.
we play roles as kids, right? Play make-believe. So these creative juices are there.
Mhm.
Um, and I think being given the opportunity as adults, again, all the creative arts therapies available to anybody of any age, but to be given an opportunity as adults to use the creative arts both therapeutically and in therapy. I don't know, maybe it's something that you could speak to, like drama as therapy and drama therapy being.
Yeah, that's a big question.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So it's interesting. And oh boy, yeah. Opening a can of worms here.
Oops.
So a lot of people, one of those misperceptions I have is about anybody who uses the arts in their therapy can say they're an art therapist or drama therapist or anything. No, we are
Mm-mm.
trained folks. We
Yes.
have our masters, our
Yep.
required CEUs, and different things that make us specifically unique. But yes, there are any therapists who can use some arts and some drama and some things in there. What I say when I present to people who I've often done trainings for people who are just, counselors and social workers and
Mm-hmm.
psychologists and that sort of thing. And I'll say, what I present is pretty comfortable as far as where you can go with it. I don't really get into role reversing and different things where there can be more things wrong if you're not trained to have your eye on it, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I know that talking to other creative arts therapists, we're all kind of mindful of that like there's a level that we don't necessarily want to go to for somebody who's not trained in these specific modalities. But yes, of course, there's certain things people can use,
Mm-hmm.
they're light enough and that kind of thing. So that's something. There are, issues in terms of title protection and lack of licensure in a lot of states and
Mm-hmm.
all these things I'm sure you're familiar with. I don't know how many listeners might know about the ins and outs, but creative arts therapies, again, because even though we've all been around since 1900s, most of us, I think, really became organizations like 1970s, if I'm not
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
mistaken on that. But it's been a long journey for a lot of us in terms of still small numbers and not being able to have licensure for our unique fields. A lot of people ending up getting, right, like generic counseling and stuff to
Yes.
have
Yep.
a license, all this stuff. And there are still people who do therapeutic theater, or they're like, I see a lot of times artists, I don't know exactly what they call themselves, but like healing artists or something like that. Like
Mm-hmm.
there are people in this world who do therapeutic things. Like it's nice, it's fluffy, it leaves people feeling a boost to self-esteem. All great things, not,
Yes.
not
Yes.
criticizing it.
Nope.
And thankfully, I think most of the time those people don't call themselves creative arts therapists. But yeah, once in a while, like I've had to correct people and be
Yeah.
like, are you really this is? Whether it's drama therapy or art therapy or anything, like I've had to
Mm-hmm.
kind of be like, unless you're actually trained, don't be saying that,
Mm-hmm.
which is frustrating because they could technically get away with it since there's no title protection without the licensures and stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of annoying. But I think the difference would be, so for example, even my vision board workshops are therapeutic, but not therapy,
Right. Right.
right? Like there's only a surface level we go into with anybody's, like we
Mm-hmm.
don't really get into past at all. Like even when we're talking about the obstacles, it's really just like, it might just be generic, like unhealthy relationships in my life or something, So it's, to me, that's an example of it's therapeutic. People feel really great and like inspired and connected to the people in the group, that kind
Yes.
of
Yeah.
thing. But we're not getting into like, hey, tell me about your traumas. And we're working on anxiety, depression,
Right.
like it's
Mm-hmm.
not deep. So that would be, to me, the difference in terms of therapeutic versus therapy.
And like you said, both are valid.
Yes.
Like it's
Yeah.
it's great to be doing something that feels like if somebody wants to go take a dance class because they have fun and it's a way for
Mhm.
them to connect with others. Wonderful, go do it.
Mhm.
Again, not the point of what we're doing together in a dance therapy session.
Mhm.
And again, very important to be working with somebody who is trained
Yeah.
and registered. And I know too, just to cite another blog that you have on your website is how to find somebody, a creative
Yeah.
arts therapist, which I think, yeah, Google is wonderful. We can Google anything and
Mhm.
everything nowadays. But there are other ways to find providers who are creative arts therapists. Um,
Yeah. And at the time I wrote that, there was a directory, which was so lovely,
mm.
like a Psychology Today, but for creative arts therapists. And it didn't last too long, I think a year or two. Um, but you can, even when you're on sites like, say, Psychology Today, you can look to see, does somebody have the licensed creative arts therapist license next to their name, or do they have again, a lot of us don't have licenses that speak to our name.
Right.
So looking for the national credentials. So for me, registered drama therapist. For you, registered
Registered
dance
dance.
therapist, right?
Yep, dance movement
Dance movement
therapist.
therapist, that's right. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, and the art therapist, I know it's ATR and ATRBC. So looking at all those things, that's what I tried to include in that blog to let people know that there's a lot of different titles to sort of look for.
Yeah, and from what I know, each modality, each form has its own national board
Mhm.
and website. So if folks are interested, you can look up drama therapy, and I'm sure the website will come up, and there are plenty of
Yeah.
resources.
Yeah, for drama therapy, I know it's those that are listed for find a drama therapist are pretty much private practice people,
Mm-hmm.
which I guess makes sense. Like most people at agencies aren't going to be able to see anybody, outside of it necessarily. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so we definitely do have that kind of a thing.
Yeah, so it's out there, folks. Go
Mhm.
out and do a search for yourself and find a creative arts therapist. Dance and drama is highlighted today. Definitely great forms. I guess just a general open question of what else is there that you would think people should know about drama therapy off the bat?
Hmm, good question. I guess one of the other, since we talked about most of them, I'll throw out two that we didn't talk about that I like.
Yeah.
So one of the misperceptions is creative arts therapists analyze what you create in the sessions. That, oh, you use this color. Oh gosh,
Oh,
you're a
right.
psycho, or right, something
Yes.
like that. People are worried. So we do not, right? Like every creative arts therapist I've ever talked to is like, no, we're all trained, no matter which our modalities, to ask the client what it means to them, not to assume
Yes.
that something means, like, even fascinating for me, roles can mean different things. So for example, police, the role of police, some
Mm,
people it's a very, I protect people, and that part of me is like a law enforcing, and we're talking metaphor here. Most of my clients are metaphorically, if they identify that part, or a judge or something. For them,
mhm.
that's like I'm keeping the structure in place. I'm helping keep people safe. And for some people, of course, in our recent years, some people are like, hell no, I don't identify with that. That's not a
Yeah.
part of me. So it's so interesting that certain roles can be charged in different ways. So I don't make any assumptions about what something means to somebody.
Mm-mm.
So that's something. It's like we as the therapist would ask in any kind of creation, any kind of exploration, like, what does this mean to you? How do you identify with this or not? The other one is this awkward perception people have that, oh, if I'm creating something in a session with a creative arts therapist, they're just going to be staring at me this whole time.
Mm,
Right?
mm-mm.
Like if I'm asked to draw something, or right, like for me as a drama therapist, if I ask somebody to act something out, you're right, or like to
Yeah.
embody something, or am I just staring at them awkwardly? So this is an interesting one because it depends on who you talk to. Like we're trained in different ways. Some people are more hands-on than others. To me, it's kind of more about what does a client need? And like
Mm,
I'll often
mhm.
ask a client, do you want me to join in with this thing? Like here's an example.
Yeah.
I'm big about the letting go. You heard it a little bit about how I do my vision board workshops, or like my ending rituals. So sometimes I'll ask a client, like, it sounds like you've got a lot like burdening you today. Do you need to write it down and we rip it up together and throw it in the garbage? Or do you want to like imagine throwing it out the window? Do you want to stomp on it together?
Yeah.
And when I offer those things, lots of people love that kind of stuff. They're like, oh, that's fun. Like we could do that. Some people like, I need to do this myself. Like this feels like I need to unburden it. And some people like, yeah, help me. I really like want that like co-regulation in it. So
Mhm.
to me, it varies by client. If I do ask them to do some kind of artwork, I'll ask like, you want me to doodle my own stuff over here while you do yours? Or,
Yeah.
and a
Yeah.
lot of times like, some people like that kind of co-regulation. Some people are like, you do whatever you want. You can check your phone for all I care, But like I try to stay in it with the client in that sense, like a parallel thing or something.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. For movement therapy, we did a lot of practicing of witnessing, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you talked about that in
Yeah.
drama therapy, but
Yep.
again, it's not that intense staring at you while you're doing something, but it's the seeing your experience of it
Yeah.
and
And
being with you.
I think a lot of times I would assume this is similar in dance movement therapy. Like, part of the witnessing is so that I could repeat it back,
Yeah.
like the
Right.
experience, like whether I physically embody, this is what I saw,
Mhm.
or just to observe something about it, like,
Yeah. This is what I felt in my body when
right.
you were doing
Or again, going
this.
to the analysis part of it, just like, I noticed that your shoulders seemed to droop when you did this thing. Can you
Mhm.
tell me about what that was like? What was, the
Mhm.
feeling behind that or the thought? So yeah, so witnessing isn't just about like I'm analyzing and I'm like
Yes.
criticizing. It's about like I'm validating and I'm just with you in it.
With
Yeah.
you. Which is just a huge part of therapy, is being with the
Yeah.
person, I find, for my practice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing all of those.
Yeah.
I
I think
think,
we covered all the ones that I pretty much touched on. And maybe in
yeah.
more detail than I had written about, honestly.
Well, I appreciate it. And I think, there's um just still a lot of questions out there as far as what creative arts therapies is and isn't.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's really why I'm inviting folks on this podcast with me, so that we can just start talking about it more and getting it out there more. So how can folks get in touch with you if they're interested about learning more,
Sure.
working
I
with you?
have a website. It's just my name, KristaVerrastro.com. And I do have a sign up on the blog part. I'm a person who hates pop-ups on websites, especially when you're on a website and every page you go to has the like pop-up, like
Yes.
sign up. I chose to only have it on my blog for that reason. It's like, it's not intrusive. But if people do want to sign up, I do have a newsletter that when I have interviews like this, I share.
Great.
Or I have a fun little Call Me Go device that I reviewed and have,
Cool.
people can get some money off of it if they decide to get it. So I share that. I share when I have my workshops of different sorts. So any kind of practice news like that and when I do write those blogs, that kind of
Yeah.
stuff on there. So yes, you can find me there.
Great. Thanks. I'm sorry, can you say your website one more time?
KristaVerrastro.com. So I'm sure you'll put
Excellent.
it in the show
Yeah,
notes
we'll
because my
have it.
name is not exactly easy by
Romanowski isn't easy either, but
right.
yeah, we'll definitely have it in
My
the show
name.
notes. And as somebody who has read multiple blogs on your website, easy to read, easy to kind of take in, and a lot of good information. Your whole website is great. It's really appreciated.
Thank you.
So again, thank you for joining me today. So I just wanted to mention for Steve that next on the podcast will be his guest, Meredith Canada. So you can look forward to that. That will be episode 140. I guess I probably should have mentioned we are going to be episode 139. New at this, folks. I'm still figuring it out. Appreciate your patience. But yeah, until next time, thank you. Finding your way through creative arts therapies has taken its turn. So, all right. Thanks, Krista.
Please like, subscribe, and follow this podcast on your favorite platform. A glowing review is always helpful. And as a reminder, this podcast is for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only. If you're struggling with a mental health or substance abuse issue, please reach out to a professional counselor for consultation. If you are in a mental health crisis, call 988 for assistance. This number is available in the United States and Canada.